Hi, my name is Cameron Jenkins. I'm a senior in high school. This is my last year showing dairy goats in 4-H. I've been showing dairy goats now for 9 years. This is my 11th year in 4-H and I really enjoy it. I also show open class with these registered Nigerian dwarfs, and it's a great project to start. So when you first start a dairy goat project, most of the time you get a baby goat. This right here is a yearling Nigerian dwarf, so she's not in milk. Just the basic essentials for a junior doe include just hay. Good quality hay is really reliable. Just for as they grow up, you want your animal to grow to a great size for when they get ready to be bred, as well as fresh water daily, making sure that they have plenty of water available because dairy goats need water for eventually when they make milk. Also supplements such as minerals, because dairy goats used to be mountain goats. They used to lick rocks and stuff, so minerals are essential for them as they need it for their hair quality and just their digestive system, as well as copper is a great supplement because goats can't find it naturally. They need it to survive, so you can give copper every 6 months just orally. It's a supplement easy to give. If your goats like grain, you can just put it in your hand and they'll eat it. That's a great mineral to feed your goats twice a year. Junior does most of the time need some type of grain just as they're growing up. They need some great body capacity just when they get to that age of breeding, which is around 2 years old. When you get your dairy goat project, they need to have a fence so then they don't escape, because you don't want your goat to escape, obviously. And dairy goats are herd animals, so they need a friend and a herd so they can have a buddy, because you're not their buddy if you're away from them. Goats are prey animals, so they need a friend. A great shelter such as this, it doesn't need to be as crazy expensive like this maybe, but because dairy goats normally get scared, they need some place to run and hide in case there's a predator. We lock our Nigerian dwarfs up at night just so predators don't get them or snatch them, because they are a smaller breed of dairy goat. They need to stay safe and have that place to find safety and call their home. We use bedding such as shavings. Straw is great. Anything just for them to use the bathroom and pick up. Dairy goats need a clean environment to constantly be living in, because their feet can be affected by that. So making sure they always have a dry place to lay is really beneficial for their health and their hair care, and just a healthy goat as they grow up and stuff. This is a baby goat Nigerian dwarf. Most of the time when you start your project for dairy goat, you get this cute little baby goat. It's a lot different when they start to grow up, so making sure that these guys grow big and strong for that great Nigerian dwarf project when they are in milk is essential. So when you get your baby goat, feeding them like a goat grower grain when you pick them up will help add some weight onto them because they're growing. Good proper feeding when they become of age is good, because you want your animal to start off with good feed, because the best way to get a good healthy animal at an older age is to start them off right. So starting off by feeding them well is essential. Baby goats normally tend to start eating minerals when you pick them up around at 8 weeks is when is normally the best age to pick up a baby goat, is around 8 weeks. Also spending time with them. You want your goats to be friendly, especially in the show ring. They walk around a lot and you halter train them, which you should start at a young age, because goats can be very dramatic. So starting your project and halter train them with a collar at a young age is good, and creating that bond with your dairy goat, because you are standing in the show ring for quite a long time with your project. Also, when you get to know them, you know when they may be sick, because you know their personality really well, and that's essential because dairy goats tend to show you if they're sick if you get to know them. So spending time with your baby goat is always the fun part, and you want to keep that up as they get older, not to just disregard them. But they're herd animals, so they love you very much. And when they become a year old, feeding them, getting them off of that grain, because they start to make that into fat, because they are becoming a mature animal, you need to start feeding them less of grain and focusing more of that quality hay. When they are dry, we feed our goats orchard grass hay. Good quality orchard for our goats who are dry is important. And once they become in milk, alfalfa is definitely necessary because of the nutrients in it. To make sure your goats are producing high in their lactation, alfalfa is necessary for only senior does. Orchard grass hay is only good for those goats who aren't in milk. So feeding the right proper nutrients, depending on the age of your goat, is definitely necessary. So starting out with a lot of grain when they're younger, and making sure that they start to like orchard grass at 1 year, and then feeding more when they become in milk. This is a 4-year-old Nigerian dwarf. She is fully sized. Nigerian dwarfs, they have a specific standard based. Every single dairy goat has their own standard. Nigerian dwarfs just so happen to have a height standard. So being aware of what breed that you get and the standards that are required are really great for picking out what breed that you're maybe wanting, and just so you're well-rounded in knowing that, because judges tend to ask questions about that. This goat is fully sized, so compared to her kids, she is not that much bigger because she is a dwarf animal. She needs to stay that dwarf size, so Nigerian dwarfs have a height limit of 22.5 inches. She just kidded 2 weeks ago, so when you get a Nigerian dwarf or a dairy goat, they are dairy animals, so they're eventually needed to get bred and shown as a senior goat who is in milk, or else your goat will be disqualified. So it is a requirement to breed your animal at the age of 2 years old, so then they freshen as a 2-year-old. First freshener is what we call it. Because there are different age division classes, you show your animal as a kid, then as a yearling, and then you're supposed to breed that goat as a yearling, so then they freshen as a 2-year-old, and then just so on and so on. You can breed them yearly, which we do. We breed our goats every single fall, so they freshen and have a new freshening for their age. But it is required for you to breed your animal, so then they freshen at 2 years old, and you can keep doing so. Because they're dairy animals, it's a great idea to make sure their lactation stays as high as possible, so rebreeding them is the best way to do that. These dairy animals, we dam raise, so our baby goats stay with their moms for around 8 weeks, and then they go to their new homes. Weaning them is always difficult to watch, but it's always best to dam raise because they get connected to their moms and grow up with that healthy nursing routine, and they nurse on their moms every single day and constantly. There's also the option when you breed your animals to bottle feed, so you can separate your animals right away and have little cute bottle babies in your house. It's up to the breeder and what you want to do. We dam raise, and we also sometimes will bottle feed our animals. But the kids and their health, making sure they get milk as often as needed is essential for the dairy project. When you breed your animals, making sure that they are ready to go when it is the birthing time. We do a kind of like a birth clip, I guess you would call it. We just trim their back end and their udder, so when they do give birth, they don't get mats, or the kids are able to find their udder as easy as possible, because it's essential for those kids to drink in the first 4 hours of their life. So doing a type of clip on this doe, you can see kind of on her legs and her backside. It just helps us to keep her as clean as possible so she doesn't get matted, because no one likes to lose fur if they get matted hair. As well as when you have your baby goat, they can't be shown with horns as a dairy project, so we dispud our goats with an iron around 1 week of their life. Goats can be polled or horned, so polled just means that they don't grow horns, and horn means that they do grow horns, and we dispud those animals around a week or less than that, depending on how big their horns are when they come out of the womb. But making sure that you do get your animal disbudded or you do it yourself is essential, or else your animal will be disqualified in the show ring, because it's required for a dairy goat not to have horns when you show them. This is a kidding stall. We use a more smaller, tighter area for our goats who are about to give birth, because if you have a new mom, they don't always know where their kids are. So making sure that they always keep an eye on their kids is essential, and that their kids can find their young moms. Sometimes when you first breed your animal, they're not used to being a mom. So a smaller area like this that's safe and has smaller fencing so the kids can't get out, because depending on the breed that you get, you want to make sure the fencing keeps the kids in, obviously, and the moms need to be able to find their kids, and that they are always together, because you want your kids to constantly be drinking on your moms so then they can keep gaining weight and becoming a healthy kid. When we breed our goats, it's around 2 years old, and their gestation period is 145 days. And we put our animals in these smaller stalls when we see that they're in labor, actually, because no goat likes to be confined in a small area like this. Especially, that's a lot of area to get dirty, and you don't want your animal living in a dirty environment. So getting to know your goats and their personalities is really essential. Because then you know when your goat goes into labor. And labor signs can include they're standing off by themselves and they just look like they're not themselves. Maybe they don't go up to you. Also, they start to have contractions, so they'll lift up their tails, and you can kind of see their vulva kind of go in, which is a sign of a contraction. Their udder becomes bigger because they need to fill up to feed their kids, so that's another sign of labor. As well as they might get loud, or they might start digging to kind of make a nest. So signs of labor are great to know about. So when you know your goat and their personality, you know when they're off and when it's time to put them in a stall like this. We kid our goats in these stalls and let them stay in these stalls for around 2 weeks, because Nigerian dwarf kids are smaller. They can get stepped on by the herd, and you don't want your baby goat to end up injured. So keeping them in a smaller stall or just away from the herd is essential, because baby goats don't always know when to run away when they first come out of the womb, because they're so fragile. So you want to make sure your mom is taken care of and your baby goats are taken care of. So hay, water, food, increasing your food for your mama goat, because she's always tending to her babies. Increasing that grain and making sure she has good weight on is important for keeping her milk supply up. Because she's putting all of that food into her milk, you need to know what your animal is all about and who they are. So checking their weight constantly is really great. You want to make sure your baby goats are healthy and your mom is healthy. This is our milking area. When your animal gives birth, they are in milk now. So it's necessary to milk your animal. Once those kids leave, your animal is going to start filling up, and you need to relieve them by milking them. And if you want your animal to stay in milk, it's necessary to milk them 2 times a day, making sure it's a 12-hour fill in between. This is a milk stand. It's a double stanchion, so 2 animals can go in here. It just simply closes and locks their head in here. But it's a great idea to start putting your animal on their milk stand at an early stage of their life, so when they start getting used to it, because sometimes dairy goats can be kind of dramatic. So getting them into that kind of routine and putting them up here just to check them out, and their udder, just so they're healthy, and putting them on here to feed them grain is a good idea. When you milk your animal, I started milking by hand. Learning how to milk your goats by hand is great, because not even a machine can fully empty them out. So you always have to hand milk them, even after you use maybe a milking machine. Milking them by hand completely out is a good idea. And also you want to make sure that when you milk by hand that you keep your goat even, because they're judged on their udder and what their udder looks like. So when you milk, you want to make sure that you milk them as even as possible, and to keep that udder in great condition, because they're dairy goat animals. They are judged based on what their udder looks like. So checking that they're even and that their kids are keeping them even. When you put them on the stand, sometimes they kind of freak out, so they don't want to eat. So If your goats don't eat on the stand, it might be a good idea to give them grain outside and in their stall to make sure they keep their weight up and in good condition. And when we milk our goats, I use kind of teat wipes. These are some teat wipes that we use, and I'll also spray the teat wipes with chlorhexidine and just dilute it. There's different percentages of chlorhexidine. This is 4% and this is 2%, so it just depends on what kind of percentage you're wanting to use. Chlorhexidine is a great way to clean and to disinfect and to even clean your hands and equipment and your goat's feet. Chlorhexidine is very universal when it comes to the medical world, so we spray our teat wipes with that just to soak them and to wipe their udder off. Cleaning and making sure that you milk your goats in a clean environment is essential, because you're drinking that milk or you're giving that milk away. You want your milk to stay clean and nothing gross gets in it. So you can also filter your milk. You can use cheesecloth, or you can use milk filters, or you can use coffee filters to filter your milk and put it in a glass mason jar preferably, just so no bacteria grows in that. And after I milk my animals, I will normally spray them with this teat disinfectant called Fight Back. This just helps close their orifice so nothing gets in their udder, because mastitis is pretty intense infection that can cause them to completely go out of milk. So making sure that your animal is clean when you're milking them and that they stay clean throughout their lactation, and just checking up on your animal, because health is super important when it comes to any livestock animal. So disinfecting, cleaning your hands between animals, making sure your milking stand is clean, that they're eating out of a clean grain bin, and that they themselves are clean is very essential when it comes to your milking animal. That's, I would say, the most important thing. So when you start your animal in your project, normally you get around 2 goats. So hopefully you breed both those 2 goats and you start milking by hand. It's always great to start by milking by hand because a milk machine can't even empty them fully. Maybe when you start getting more into your project, you're going to get more animals. So a milk machine is super beneficial by milking them and making that process even faster, especially if you have some pretty crazy goats. If you get them used to a milking machine, it makes that time go by a lot faster. Milking machines are kind of a more expensive tool, but are super beneficial if you keep up with that, maintaining, making sure it's clean, and that you filter it properly, and you will take it apart and clean it, deep clean it, because the milk goes through these lines, and you're drinking that milk or you're giving that milk away. You want to make sure the milk machine stays as clean as possible. Warm water is the best way to clean machines like this. I will clean the machine after with warm soapy water and then warm bleach water to make sure that none of the milk stays in the lines and that milk stone doesn't develop in these lines, because you're drinking that milk. So making sure it's clean is important. Milking machines are beneficial for milking multiple animals at once. The more animals you get, the more you have to milk. So making sure that you milk them at a fast pace, because sometimes they start to get angry, so you want to milk them at a decent pace and make sure they're emptied out completely. Is super important for every project. Through every season, there's always something that you need to be aware of for your project, especially in the winter time as your goats grow more of their hair and their cashmere to stay warm. Sometimes lice and mites can start to become an issue, because lice and mites like a warm environment, and goats have very fluffy fur, so they can be attracted on your goats in the winter time. So checking your goats yearly in the wintertime for lice and mites is essential, and deworming might be an needed step to get rid of that in the springtime and in the wintertime, because that's when lice and mites are most active. on livestock animals. So checking your goats during those months for lice and deworming them as necessary might be something to look for, as well as maybe supplementing them with herbs yearly is a good idea, just to help create immunity and make sure your goats have a strong immune system, and that they keep up their health through each month. Every season is different, so in the springtime, when you shave your goats down, checking for lice and making sure those herbs are working, or it might be necessary to use a medication and deworm them. Baby goats are normally dewormed, so when you pick up your project, if they're an animal, ask your breeder, what have you given them vaccine-wise? Normally baby goats and their moms need to be given CDT, which is a vaccine, as well as BOCI for selenium and all of those nutrients that they are lacking in. It's a yearly shot that should be given to the moms and the kids. So you should ask your breeder, what has the breeder given them? What do you need to give your animal? Because if you pick them up before 8 weeks, sometimes you yourself need to deworm your animal and at that necessary age, as well as ask your breeder when you pick up your animal, what do you do? What should I be doing yearly? What kind of supplements have you been giving your animal? Questions like that, and making sure you're educated in what you're getting is essential to making sure you're staying on top of that routine for your dairy project and continuing that good lifestyle. As well as good general maintenance is trimming their feet. There's a variety of clippers you can get. These are probably my favorite. They are very sturdy and easy and very sharp to clip, which you need to be careful of. Not going too deep, but no one has ever killed a goat trimming their feet, so don't be afraid to go just that extra step, because the more you trim, the better, because you want your goat to be walking on a good set of feet. That's their foundation. Trimming them not just right before the show, but maybe once a month, every 3 months. It's good routine, and your goats get used to it, used to that hands-on experience, and ready for that show ring. You want your animal to be in good condition, not only clipping, but on their feet and their health and their fur. Vaccines, yearly vaccines, and deworming and hoof trimming are essential for each animal, and staying on top of it is definitely necessary. So preparing your show animal is always the first step before you step into that show ring. So full body clip is necessary. You don't want to walk in to the show ring with your animal looking like this. Full body clip, and also on the scorecard there is a section for cleanliness. So you can earn half of those points in your showmanship class just by cleaning your animal before you go into that show ring. When you walk into the show ring, your judge is going to pick up their feet, look at their tail, look at their face, look at their udder, look at their ears, their nose. They're going to look at every single part of your goat. So you want to make sure your goat is pristine and clean and not fresh out of the pen. Wiping them off with baby wipes is a great tool. Using teat wipes on them just to wipe off their udder, making sure that not only do they have a good clip job, but that it is you're clipping every single part under their stomach, getting every single hair, because someone might win over you because your clip job is kind of rough. So preparing your animal to its best ability is the first step into winning that showmanship class, and making sure you have that cleanest animal, and that's always can be a game changer and might give you a better placement in that class. Making sure your animal doesn't have any stains on it. If you have a white animal, maybe using a spot remover or towels to wipe them off, making sure they don't have any eye goobers, or that their nose is clean and that they look very healthy, and like they haven't even been living in a barn, that they've been living in a house, and that they've been clean and not around poop. So that's definitely a way that you can show off, is just by the cleanliness, because we're wearing white, so your goat has to be basically wearing white and just be spotless. And using clippers and getting all the fine hair off of them, and making sure you're not missing any spots getting under their elbows, which might be difficult, beginning where their feet are and they're around their hooves, and clipping their feet before, and wiping them off right before you go in the shower ring, and making sure that yourself is clean, maintaining just that elegant, clean, pristine kind of stature for both you and your animal is important to winning that class. Before we clip our animals, because she is very hairy and definitely winter ready, she needs to get washed before she gets clipped so we don't kind of run down those clipper blades. So we will normally wash our goats. They're not a fan of water, but it's necessary so then our clippers stay in good condition. We'll wash them with horse shampoo or kind of a dandruff livestock shampoo, so then their hair stays moisturized. Because we're giving them a full body clip, they need to be clean before we clip them, and that the blades can go through them smoothly without running down those blades, and making sure it's a smooth, clean cut. So when you start to show your animal, you should start at a young age, because dairy goats have always a mind of their own. Starting at a young age is really great, because then they get used to just standing simply when you're holding their collar, and they just become that mellow goat. Because when we show our dairy goats, we always will just stand in the show ring, and you're not supposed to be touching your animal but just holding their collar. So starting at a young age and making sure that your goat creates a patient attitude, and it starts becoming a patient goat, is a good idea to start at that young age. And just simply having a collar on them at all times is good, so then you can just grab them whenever and you can walk them around and start making them used to being pulled on, and that you're in control of them, and that you know where to go and you know where to stand, because every goat has a mind of their own, and you want a goat that is used to having a collar on and is not going to fight you, because that's always very frustrating in the show ring. When we show our animals, we always will use a show chain, and it goes right under their neck like I'm holding this goat. We always use a collar and not a halter, because they're a dairy goat, we want them to be elegant and just to show off their whole body. So just a collar is necessary, and is actually required when showing a dairy goat. This is a snake chain, and we just got this on Amazon, so you can get them anywhere, but a show chain is what we show dairy goats in, to show off their body. So when you walk into that 4-H ring with your young animal or older animal, you always are going to want your goat between you and the judge. The whole point of showing your goat is to show your goat off, so you don't want to be blocking them. Whenever we enter in the dairy goat ring, you always are going to be walking clockwise. So maybe you don't want to be the leader the first time when you walk in, but following the leader, and just seeing what other people are doing is a great tip that I would suggest. But when we walk our goats, you always want to keep their head up, and that the collar is right underneath their throat, and you're leading them and you're not choking them. Because we walk with collars, you don't want to be choking them. But keeping a constant, flowing, smooth, elegant pace, not fast and not slow, is always a good idea. Because they're dairy goats, we don't walk around like meat goats at a fast pace. We walk slow, and we want to show off our dairy goat, because dairy goats are elegant animals, and because these are livestock animals that are viewed as elegant, we wear white when we show. So we're showing off the goat, not ourselves. And we have very minimal kind of equipment, because we have a chain and we're wearing white. So we wear white pants, white shirt, closed-toed shoes, and it's all about the goat and showmanship and how you are showing off the goat, because that's what showmanship is about, is how you show your animal. So when we show a dairy goat, we walk in clockwise at a slow, elegant pace, making sure their head is up. You don't want their head to be down. You're showing them off, so you want their head to be up and nice and high, just at their normal, maybe kind of position, and to show them off at a good stature. We also, when we show goats, we will stand and we will set them up. So instead of bracing your goat, we're going to be on the other side of your animal, and you want each leg to be in a certain position. So their front legs go straight underneath their shoulder, so you can see how it's naturally placed down straight underneath their shoulder, and then their back legs get placed, their hocks need to be in line with their pin bones, just basically like that, just at a natural stance. Showing off their back legs and setting them up. Practicing touching their legs is a good idea to start at a young age, because you're going to be touching their legs often and fixing them, because your animal's going to move in the show ring, so you want your goat to be okay with you touching them and feeling them, and also that they're used to where you place their feet. The judge always comes and will touch them, so you always want to make sure that you smooth out your animal. She's currently has her winter coat on her, so she's not show prepped at all. She's very hairy, but when we get our animals ready, we will do a full body clip, and we use electric kind of a clipper that just plugs into the wall, and we clip their full body in a 7 blade and their legs in a 10 blade, because it just looks cleaner. We clip their head. You don't particularly want your doe to have a beard, so she has her kind of winter grandma beard going on right now, but that will get clipped off when she goes in the show ring. And we clip their head, their tail, everything gets clipped. That's a show clip, and she's a senior doe, so eventually when she kids, she will have an udder, and we clip that udder in the shortest blade we can acquire. So I normally clip my goat's udders in a 50 blade, so it's right to the skin, because we want to show off the texture of the udder and the skin type, and show the veins, the milk veins, and showing off just the udder, because she's a dairy goat. So I'll clip the full udder and even a little bit in front of their fore udder, just to show the quality and what the udder kind of looks like. So she's definitely not show ready, but she will be eventually. When you're in the show ring, the judge is constantly walking around, and you need to make sure you keep your eye on that judge. So when the judge is on the opposite side, you want to stay on the other side, sandwiching that goat in between you and the judge. If the judge starts to move and stands directly in front, you want to stay on that side, and that's kind of the tricky part where people get kind of mixed up. They want to switch the side, but you just want to stay on that same side. If the judge does cross over their neck, that's when you switch over. Just like how I did, I kind of flip my body around, and then I switched my hand holding the collar, because you always want your hand to not just be covering, and you don't want to be twisting away from the judge. You always want to be facing the judge, and but do it as smoothly and calmly as possible. Don't freak out, and try and make sure that you know what you're doing and you have the right side is always the confidence that the judge wants to see. And even when you're walking your animal, making sure that you know where the judge is, simply stopping, keeping your eye on the judge. If the judge walks behind, I'm showing off my animal, I'm standing away. Now I'm going to flip sides just as smoothly as possible and as elegant as possible, and not making it such a big deal. But knowing where the judge constantly can be the tricky part, especially if you're focused on your goat, if they're not standing. But what's going to stand out is making sure that you know where the judge is. Even if you're looking down and setting up your animal, constantly be looking at that judge, but by making sure you're doing it in a smoothest way possible. So like I said before, when you walk in the ring, you're always walking clockwise, keeping their goat's head up, and we obviously walk at a slow pace, so something as slow as this actually is how we walk our animals. Not as slow as dairy cows though, but just at a normal pace. You always want to keep the goat between you and the judge. So if you were the judge, this is the correct stance that I am in. So the judge always tells you to stop eventually in the show ring, and every single time that you stop your animal, you always want to set them up. So making sure that their front feet are directly underneath their shoulder, and that their back feet are in line with their pin bones, something like this. Every foot should be placed accordingly, and if your goat moves, you need to move it right back to that necessary position. What shows off to the judge is that your animal stays completely still after you just put those feet down. So training your animal to be able to be okay with you touching their feet, and you also want to be constantly checking them. So standing away from your animal shows that your animal knows how to be shown, and that's very impressive that you're able to stand away from your animal and just simply stand here while the judge goes from person to person asking you questions. If the judge were to flip onto the other side, I should move over and cross in front of the animal, because you would never want to cross behind your animal, because that's dangerous, and that's also not how you're supposed to do it in the dairy goat world. But you saw that she just moved, so I need to check that and reposition her accordingly. Constantly checking her and making sure that she is set up is going to be what's impressive to your judge. And if she keeps moving, obviously you're going to keep wanting to set that animal back up and then stand away. Constantly making sure that they're set is impressive to the judge, and that you know what you're doing. And while you're setting your animal, always keep your eye on the judge, because the judge is going to be constantly walking around, and you want your animal between you and the judge, always flipping in the front and switching hands. And when you walk, you do the same exact thing. So if I walk and you're the judge, then I should flip and keep my eyes on the judge while I'm walking and being aware of my surroundings. And when I stop, I always will set up my animal, making sure that they're set. And it's a constant stop, set, walk, keep your eye on the judge kind of process. That's basically the basics of showing a dairy goat. And always make sure that you know your surroundings and that you're not going too fast, not going too slow. And your goal is to be the first one to set your animal up at a good and decent pace that was not speedy and quick and kind of all crazy, but set your animal's goat foot down, leave it be. So constant practice and making sure you get it right the first time is impressive to the judge, and you want to stand out by setting them up once and leaving them alone. That's always impressive, because you want to stand out by having that kind of slow maneuver. When you get your show goat and you're walking into the show ring, the judge always is going to come up to you first thing after you set up your animal. They're always going to ask you a question as if, tell me about your goat. So you need to know about your goat, obviously. What kind of breed is your goat? What age is your goat? How many freshenings? What color is your goat? If your goat is horned or polled? When did they freshen? These are all little questions that you need to know about your animal and how to respond to the judge if that first question is going to be, tell me about your goat. You want to know the most possible information about your goat that you are showing, and just kind of like you're kind of bragging about your goat when you walk in, and who they are, and just kind of like a caption for them, and they're like a simple short message about them in a sense that you're sharing to the judge. As well as just simple questions like that, they ask body part questions. So you need to know the simple body parts of your animal, and not the skeleton, but the body parts of your animal. Because they're dairy goats, they have many parts that make them up. So your judge is definitely going to ask you body part questions, as simple as their head to maybe where their thurls are. So you need to start studying definitely the parts of a dairy goat. As well as, because dairy goats, when we show them, they're show goats, they're registered under an association called ADGA, which stands for American Dairy Goat Association. All show goats should be registered under that, and they get a tattoo depending on their farm. Normally goats get tattooed in their ears, but that's just for a registered goat. Because it's an association, they're judged based off of their scorecard. So most judges will ask you scorecard questions. It's called the ADGA scorecard. It's updated yearly. They always will ask you questions based on the ADGA scorecard. And what the scorecard is essentially is their judging card. So they are kind of judged based out of 100 points, and it's broken up into categories, and and also by age. So there's different points for a junior doe, a senior doe, and a buck. So to know the senior doe point categories is important because your judge might ask you, what do you like about your goat and how many points is it on the scorecard? So not only do you need to know well-rounded about your goat, but you need to know not just facts, but how they are built. So start studying the parts, start studying how a dairy goat is put together, start studying what makes a good dairy goat and the parts that make them good quality show animal. So your judge might ask you what's good about your animal, so you want to know how to respond. This goat is very deep bodied, so I could tell the judge that my goat is deep bodied. Or you also need to know your pros and cons list about your goat. So when it comes to showmanship, not only is it about how you show your animal, but it's very knowledge based for dairy goats. You need to know the breeds, you need to know the parts, you need to know the scorecard, you need to know everything about your animal, what makes her good and put together and what makes her maybe not as good put together, because they do ask you the cons of your animal, and because they're judges, they judge on the body and how they are put together and what makes them a good show animal. So they judge your animal and how you respond to those types of questions. So you need to be very well rounded in your specific animal. Every project takes time and a lot of effort and discipline, so putting in the most effort that you can is always important. All these facts and tips are great to start out with, but it's also about living through it and to just simply go and show. Don't be scared to go out there and go to an open show. Don't be scared to ask those questions. I would say my biggest regret is just being too stressed out about the moment, but simply living through it and knowing and learning from your mistakes is definitely the most important lesson that I've learned by having goats for 9 years. Simply going into the show ring, hearing advice from others, asking questions, and raising goats every year has always taught me a new lesson by learning from my mistakes. I've learned many things over the years, but you can always learn more, and there's not just thing as a bad show. There's always good experiences coming out of it, and don't take yourself for granted or put too much pressure on yourself, because every opportunity is a learning opportunity. So I would say, spend time with your animals. Don't always stress about your animal being perfect, but put in the hard work. It definitely pays off. Don't be stressed about not winning, because it will come if you keep at it and you put in the hard work, because that's what I learned over the years is I always beat myself up that I didn't maybe do as good at one show, but I always learned something new, and that's definitely the most important lesson I have learned. Dairy goats is a fun project. Baby goats are always fun to watch and just watch them jump around, so spending as much time with them and knowing their personalities and who they are and picking your showmanship goat so they stand well and have that good personality is always key for the Dairy Goat Project. We talked about multiple breeds in the Dairy Goat Project, and you can always experiment by getting a different breed every single year and just finding what dairy goat that you'd like. You can also walk around fair and see all the different breeds and ask questions and get to know the breeders and maybe what they like, their pros and cons on the different breeds. There are so many dairy goat options out there. I personally love the dwarfs. They're very cute and they have many different colors. They are very competitive, but there are so many options out there for you and what you like and what kind of size of goat that you like and all the different animals out there. And it's so important to ask those questions and to walk up to those people at fair just to learn about each kind of different breed and what to expect. And I hope to see you with your new Dairy Goat project at fair, and always come and stop by and say hi.